we would play shows, and there's literally people that are like, "Get me out of here, I'm scared." And it's like, dude, what's fucking cooler than that?
What is up, everyone? Thanks for tuning in again. This is the Scoped Exposure podcast. An episode for this season that I'm very excited about. You know, now that we're into season 3 and we got over 200 episodes, I always like when we start a new season to kind of look behind and see who are guests that I want to bring back for a round 2 for a second discussion. And, one that was earlier in season 1 that I felt was kind of a very cool opportunity as well as a really good conversation. And, Isaac and I were talking just before recording about we only recorded for maybe an hour and change. So I hope that we are able to play out a little bit longer because I feel like there's a lot of things to catch up on and talk about. But without further ado, you know him, you love him, hot chocolate king of the Midwest, Isaac of Knock Loose, Inclination, Two Witnesses, and Weapon X. Dude,
Thank you.
thanks for coming
That's
back.
it's a wonderful title you just gave me.
Let
It's
me
a
add that
wonderful
one to the
title.
resume. In addition to guitarist, producer,
Yeah.
all that shit.
It's the most important one for
Yeah.
sure.
So yeah, like I said, Isaac, it's been a minute since you've been on the pod. And before we get into it, I want to give you just a few roses, because listening back to that interview to make sure that we wouldn't recover anything that we've already talked about. I remember that vividly as that was, PacSun had come on first as far as a Knock Loose focused episode, and then you came on, and just you opening up with like, I'm stoked to do this because I'm a listener of this show. That was,
Yeah.
I think, one of the first realizations. I was like, oh, this isn't just my, close pocket of friends or like my general, like there are other people, within, different bands and scenes who are really checking this out. I'm not sure if it's a daily or a weekly basis, but yeah, that was something that back then was really much kind of like a opening of my mind as well as, re-listening to that. So I wanted to give you some props for that, for giving me, not only that kudos, but at the same time, this time around.
Yeah, of course, man. I mean, I think you're running a really, really cool thing right here. I think that Scoped is I think that you're like hitting all the right names and actually providing like great content for people. And not only that, but the fest and all that seems to be like something that people are really into. And so I'm team Scoped.
I
I'm a Scoped head. I'm about it.
I just start need to make some shirts that say I'm official scoped head.
Scoped head, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. That's I've always struggled with like how do I call my fans of because I always feel like that's weird because I'm just
Scopers.
scopers, scopies.
Scope,
But scopies is
scope,
a separate thing. Scoped heads, I think that's the move.
Scope heads is the dopest one.
Is there because
As long as you pay me for the shirts that you make, it's all good.
scoped heads, and on the back it just says certified by, and then Isaac Hale.
That works. You actually don't have to pay me, just as long as my name's on it. It's all
Yeah. Just paying a little bit extra per shirt just for that small little hit on the back.
good. Yeah.
Does Knock Loose have a nickname for your guys' fan base? Because I know, like, if you're looking at like a band like Slipknot, it's not like
Yeah.
Slipknotties or anything like that. It's like we're just calling these people maggots. I don't know if there's been something that's curated from that side.
We've never had a name for them, ever. For some reason, people tried to make Knockos a thing for a second, which is really stupid. But the closest thing that we had to that is, as a joke, we used to have these merch items with like jerseys with "idiot" on the back because we thought it was really funny. So we would just say "idiots."
Knockos or I think Knockos has some brand potential for sure.
Yeah, and obviously, I don't assume that anyone that listens to Knock Loose is an idiot, so I'm not fully on that train, but it was a funny merch item at least, so
Yeah.
I'm
When was that merch item in circulation? That was like the old hem days at the same time?
yeah, that was probably like 2016,
Mm.
probably
It's
something
kind of
early
it's
that
kind of a
time.
move for a band as big as you guys just to have your logo and then just say idiots on the back of it at this
Yeah,
point in
I
time.
mean I mean, like, calling your fans maggots is almost more insulting, so,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, there's no wrong way. But yeah, as far as the time we're recording this, Isaac, because I know someone could be listening to this 1 week after it drops or 1 year. So the time, place always matters. Inclination just dropped. Unaltered perspective. Very serendipitous because I a little later into season 2 I had Tyler on and we talked a little bit about that just before it dropping. And just today, I dropped a podcast where we did like kind of a listening party style where we featured one of the tracks. I said I was like, I hope this is just like a good omen for a good convo with Isaac if there's a feature of one of those songs. But
Yeah,
yeah, definitely something a huge talking point. And we haven't the last time we talked, Knock Loose was incapable of touring, and then it feels like ever since it was an option it's just been on the road more than at home.
yeah,
But before we get into all that, that we have to check some bevs, so it's tradition for the guest to go first. So
yeah.
what do you
Uh,
bring into the show for a drink?
Today on Scoped, as a scope head, I'm bringing a fucking water
Oh.
because, like we were talking about earlier, before we were recording, my sleep schedule's destroyed. Um, it's 2 p.m. It's around 2 p.m. here, and I've been falling asleep at between 5 and 6 a.m. and then waking up at like 10 or 11 a.m. And I don't drink coffee.
Mhm.
So I kind of just chug water, and it just kind of lifts the spirit,
Yeah,
It's kind of
it's kind of a need just to
all
have
right.
a flush of the system as soon as you wake
Oh
up.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, my bev, I put in a lot of work for this bev for you today.
Yeah,
Because in our last conversation, you're like, I got to put some respect on the name when it comes to hot
yeah,
chocolate. So I went out and got, at the farmer's market. So I know it's good. This isn't just from the no frills or anything like that. I got a hot cocoa chai masala powder.
wow.
And dude, rate this cocoa. I'm just
I
doing this for you.
Dude, that I have this water with me right now, and now I just want to die because I want what you're having. So, you know,
Yeah, it's too bad. The fact that this podcast is over Zoom, it allows us to connect. But like, I much look forward to the in-person podcast that I can hopefully do one day, or even have the budget to be able to either like fly people in or catch them while
yes,
they're on tour, and then I could just make you this fucking hot chocolate.
yeah,
Um,
because if I will drink yours if you put it in front of me. So there you go.
Right. Just like some horror movie shit of sticking your hand through the laptop and grabbing it. But
Oh,
I was
yeah,
like, it would feel wrong not to check a Coco for
yeah,
our
that's
combo.
true. That's
So
true.
as far as you taking a swig, I'm cheersing you.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming back on the
Cheers.
pod,
Of course, no problem.
establishing the Scoped Head name and mantra.
Yep. As of right now, that's the official title.
The other thing I'm really realizing is I have this cocoa with the whipped cream and all the fancy shit, but I did not grab a napkin or Kleenex to like, because it's absolutely catching in the mustache. So
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna have to be secretive as far as getting rid of it.
I won't let them know that's happening.
When Jordan is editing this, please cut to Isaac only when I'm just like dealing with all
There you
this
go.
bullshit.
Please.
So Isaac, because you've been on the podcast before, we've already kind of done the backstory as far as, you getting into music and some of the early stages. So this is more of like a homie check-in as far as
Yeah.
how are things, and things have been busy, like I said before, but like what's up?
Um, yeah, personally, like things are good. They've just they're possibly busier than they've ever been for me. Um, because we just got Knock Loose just returned from our last tour or two, more accurately, 2 days ago, and that tour we left for in August, and it is now November. So we were pretty much on the road for like 3 or 4 months off and on. We had like a one little break, like one little like week or two long break, but other than that, we've been on the road for many, many months.
Hmm.
And that was the Suicide Boys tour into the Bring Me the Horizon tour, which were both full US's. Um, so just getting back from that, while the Inclination record is releasing during that time, um, while getting back uh, getting back here, having to fly out tomorrow to Los Angeles for a KL related thing, and then leaving for Europe right after that for another month.
Hmm.
And this is happening while I also just bought a house like 2 months ago. So,
Which, by the way,
so
congrats.
thank you.
I
So
yeah.
there's a couple things going on, there's a couple things happening. So
Yeah. Um,
busy.
yeah. And do you prefer that? Because I know for me, it's like, some people they just need one kind of creative side project or like their main thing, and that's their focus. And I think there's something to be said there. But for someone like myself, it's like I need to be playing in two bands, filming shows, doing a podcast, doing all these other like I like that busyness and chaos. Are you kind of the same way, or do you feel overwhelmed as of late?
Um, I I am like a put me on tour 11 months out of the year type of head.
Hmm.
Like I enjoy the grind. And that hasn't changed at all. I think this last couple months has been slightly different just because I bought that house. And so I have kind of wanted to be around more just to kind of work on that because as of right now, I bought a house in like the 1st of September that I'm not going to be living in until December, but I'm paying for it.
Right. Yeah.
So like that's kind of a pain in the ass. And also this last tour was probably like one of the more stressful ones, um, kind of like internally, and because there was just some issues like behind the scenes stuff that was a bit more stressful than the other ones that we'd done. So that on top of everything, on top of being gone for so long, definitely made it like a bit tougher. But I think generally speaking, like I'm still excited to go to Los Angeles, to go to Europe. Like I'm definitely not the type of person to be intimidated by that sort of thing at all. So
Yeah.
I've always been a grinder, and I've remained that way, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So I'm all for it.
Yeah. And I guess like, there's been things even in the early days of Knock Loose that kind of like were necessary to build up that stamina to playing at playing at the degree that you guys are now. Like if it was
Yeah.
just zero to hero, like you see some of those bands in so many different genre lanes that they have their claim to fame, but they burn out really easily because they don't realize the level of work and logistical challenges just going into that. So am I right in thinking that like some of the early knock days like serendipitously prepped you to have this crazy 11 months out of the year, out
Yeah,
lifestyle?
I mean, that's correct. I mean, like for example, like we just had a pretty tough tour internally, but that doesn't it's not the hardest thing. It might not be the hardest thing that we've ever been through. Like we've done so much that, it's like whenever we're problem solvers. So whenever we face something, we do our best to, you know, swerve around it, find the way through it.
Mm,
Um, and that kind of experience is very helpful. But at the same time, the more you grow as a band, the more challenges you face, and the more varied they are.
mm,
So it's like when you're touring in a DIY aspect in a van, like if you're doing just hardcore shows around the country, it's like, dude, you can show up at 6 p.m. right before doors, and it's like it's pretty low stress. But there's different stresses depending on the different levels of touring. Like
Right.
there's things you have to worry about when you're doing DIY stuff that you don't have to worry about when you're doing big stuff. And then when you're doing big stuff, there's stuff you don't have to worry about that you do have to worry about when you're doing smaller stuff.
Mhm.
So it's just two different levels of shows and touring, and there's different challenges, and it's all about problem solving and facing them head on and just doing your best to work through it. And luckily I've been on the road so much that, and we've been on the road so much collectively, and that it's part of the adventure,
Mhm.
is to just kind of, figure out, problem solve and figure out your way through things.
So maybe a question to that aspect, just came to mind is when you're doing a DIY tour, it's just you and 3 to 4 or 5 of your other friends that are all doing these things together. Um, and most of the onus is on you. It's like your guitar string breaks. Okay, we need to make a stop at the local music store to get some strings because someone didn't pack extras for the tour, or a head
Yeah.
blows, or someone has a family situation, needs to fly home, and then we're learning stuff. Like, is there certain issues that arise that maybe some of those don't those things there's more in place to prep for those things, but are there issues that arise on a tour now that you don't have control over, or the onus is on other people because they're hired to do XYZ? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're still a pretty hands-on band. Like
Sure.
we don't bring guitar techs or bass techs or drum techs or anything like that. So like all gear, all that shit is still on us.
Mhm.
So we're still completely responsible for everything. Um, I say like an example of problems that you could have that are kind of out of our purview are like, we have a light show now.
Mhm.
Like we have a production, we bring lights and LED panels, and there's so much work that goes into that. Like shout out Taylor, our LD, and any LD techs that we've had in the past that have to deal with those issues and have to deal with those problems, because that takes a lot of work, a
Mhm.
lot of work and a lot of time. And then things like merch is becomes a very, very stressful thing at that level. A lot of times there's different people selling it. A lot of times there's vendors selling it. There's a lot that needs to be worked out.
Mhm.
There's restocks that need to happen. Like I said, shout out Taylor again for being in charge of that, and Trey, who helped on this last tour too.
Mhm.
And anyone else that's helped us in the past, because the more the higher numbers you're talking about, the more stress there is,
Mhm.
to make the whole machine work,
Yeah.
and sometimes there's miscommunications. There's a lot of different talking going around by different teams and different people communicating. And so just making sure that it all goes smoothly is tough sometimes,
Yeah.
and it requires a team of people to make it work,
Yeah.
and like I said, luckily for the most part, we've had a team that's been, most of our team members that we have are dudes that are close to home,
Sure.
so
Yeah.
it's people that
It's
we
a
know.
no-brainer
So
to have Trey slinging merch at Wild Rose because,
sure.
he's
Yeah,
blood to some.
exactly.
Right.
And
Yeah.
we always have people that we have people that we trust. And then sometimes, like I said, on this past tour, there was a couple team members that we didn't know beforehand,
Mhm.
and sometimes you kind of just have to hope that things are good,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, like I said, luckily we have people surrounding us that are good, that have been very, very good at making that happen.
Yeah.
So
I think, whether a band is a little bit more interesting because many a times, like, there are people that start bands with the hopes that it can become something and, turn into a big scale business. But like at the same time, there's lots of bands that reach a level of success where they don't plan on it. They don't imagine that their breakdowns or their music gets to that level where they have to think about it more in a business sense. But I think having the right people in place, whether it's that or you're actually like running something, is like that's almost more crucial than the actual like skill level, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like having
Yeah.
people that you can trust. Like the fact that I'm sitting here doing this podcast with you and Jordan, who normally is producing my podcast with me, he's in Minneapolis filming a festival that we were offered, but I couldn't attend myself. So he's out there doing that for Scoped, and I have full confidence that everything is captured and everything will be like according to plan once we get into the editing phase. But like without him, I don't know how there's really no other people that entrust with that level of responsibility. So yeah, shout. It's just I wanted to hit on that as far as like having the right people in place to do it, not just like the best person in place, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, shout out responsible team members that are always there to get it done, because
Mhm.
it can't like the band becomes a larger entity at some point, and you have to have people involved that are going to have your best interests in mind and handle things well,
Speaking
so
of best interests in mind, I want to circle back quickly to you mentioning you bought a house,
yeah.
which I thought was just really cool. How like when Paxson came on so long ago, we talked about him becoming over the pandemic. It was just like doing candle company and then being a realtor, and then to see, is that correct? Is you buying the house through him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that strange experience as far as like we played in a band together and now we're at this stage in our lives doing this together?
No, I mean, it was cool because he's actually he works with a bunch of our friends now,
Mm,
because it just kind of makes sense. A lot of the work that he gets, a lot of the people that he ends up helping out are just friends or friends of friends, and which is what's cool about his line of work that he's into. So you
mhm,
can kind of just like help homies out. Um, so the process was actually a bit easier than I thought.
mm,
It was like uh, he really helped me. He really helped with kind of having a homie there to help explain things and someone there that's easy to contact.
mm,
Um, it was very beneficial. I mean, it was crazy. It's crazy to know that he's up to that now, and that's just something that he does all the time.
yeah,
But it's awesome for him.
mhm,
So, but yeah, it was actually a relatively finding the house itself was a relatively chill experience.
mm,
Luckily. So
yeah, and as much as the band tours, like how have you like I guess like set it up in a way where it's like, or I'm sure because I literally just moved like this past weekend, like this is the new podcast space, but like
yeah,
literally if I pan down on the floor, it's like an absolute just like dumpster fire, like a bomb went off in here. Um, so I'm sure you have similar things where you're still kind of doing that, but like is the goal in mind to be like when I am here, I can work on XYZ and even have bands come over to record? Like, are there things, or is it like this is my space, get the fuck out of here?
no, I mean, I was able to get a house with enough space that's comfortable for me to live in and could be possible for someone else to live in, and also has a studio
Mm,
space in it. So it's like a lot of people when it comes to a first home are kind of just like assuming that it's like, oh, you're here for probably like 4 years or 5 years, and then maybe you'll be out of there, you'll move up. But I really wanted this to be someplace that, because I really love Louisville. I never like planned on leaving. I really think that this is a place that I could be for like an extended period of time, just because it does have a whole room that I'm going to dedicate to studio. It has a whole office, guest bedroom, and it has a whole, downstairs master, all that. So
mm,
there's plenty of space in there. As long as I'm like not getting a shit ton of roommates, which I don't plan on ever doing. I want it to be my space, but
right.
I definitely am going to cater it to me. But having a dedicated workspace where I could have people in there and could like that's going to be really beneficial to me, like mentally, and it's going to allow it's going to inspire me to do more,
Hmm.
because the past, me being so just like me being so all over the place for the past year, when touring came back, um I haven't really written much. There hasn't been a crazy amount of music that I've been working on as far as writing goes. A lot of it was done during the pandemic, and then it all came out. and it's just kind of just like playing
Right.
all this stuff. I have all these records that came out like in 2021, um, that I was working on. So it'll be nice to be able to get that set up and kind of get back in the flow of creating music. You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah. Is what is essential for your setup as far as doing that? Like, do you need to have, like, a cup of hot chocolate, or do you need to have certain things? Or is
I,
it like, do you have a surge of inspiration and you're just trying to grab the nearest guitar to figure it out and get it out of your head?
I mean, most ideas that I have are literally just like me singing stuff, and then like getting that down on a guitar
Mhm.
is the stand. If that's the standard, is like me being like da 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 da, and then making that happen on a guitar. Um, and then usually, with today's studio stuff that you can do, you can put drums on it and program a bunch of stuff, and then that's usually how my demos come about.
Mhm.
Um, but preferably, I have the option to play whatever instrument. Like I said, because I play piano, I play drums, I play bass. Like I play all this stuff. So having all that stuff that you're able to like work on and practice with and all
Mm.
that, like that's super beneficial.
So
So
you might have a drum set and all instruments that you ideally would write, for any of your projects, just set up and ready at the go to be able
yeah,
to do. Interesting.
yeah, that's the goal, is to have like literally like amp and cab or DI and bass cab and drum set, like all there in different corners, and
Right.
just having them all run to the computer at once. So whenever I have an idea for any instrument, and the keyboard, so I can just like make it happen. Just
Yeah.
super easy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's like alleviating any friction to be able to just let the ideas start to flow is like
Yeah.
is so important when you're writing music. And yeah, sometimes it's like, like I need to just, when I have something, I'm like, I know I'm in the middle of like, making dinner right now, or like I'm working on something, but I need, like, this idea came to me and I need to chase that curiosity to see where it goes. And that's led to like some crazy songs that, even if I fear that if I hesitate, it will be gone forever.
Yeah. I mean, the best songs that I've ever written are the ones that go super fast. That
Mhm.
like I like the surge of inspiration is so quick that it's just like you finish it in like an hour and you're like, oh my God, like this is like it, wow. Those are my favorite songs I've ever done. So being able to work when inspiration is hitting is like really important.
So I'm going to use the word inspiration as the segue into the Inclination record, because I said this on the listening style episode that I had mentioned. As far as, I think we featured Without a Word. Um,
Yeah.
list at the end of the record, I was like, there are very I can't recall any other straight edge bands that leave me this inspired. And that that was just like the overall, like, the word that I just kept coming back to when I would re-listen to it. Um, so yeah, let's talk about it. Like you said, and I think after posting it, I think I talked to your new drummer's name is Chris, right?
Chris. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think he was like, yeah, I think for the few people that I've talked to from the band about it, it's like, yeah, I'm just so glad it's out. So it's been in the chamber for a long, long time, but just now it's actually seeing the light of day. So, you know, Inclination had 2 awesome EPs and a few singles randomly kinda spread out through different comps and whatnot. Tell me about, like, okay, like, we need to do the full front to back, and we need to make it as good as 2 EPs if it was split that way.
Yeah. I mean, we knew the full length was next, because we weren't going to do another 7 inch. Um, and it was kind of just like a big intimidating thing that we were excited that, excuse me, I mean, I was excited to work on, you know, because I'm doing most of the writing
Mhm.
myself. Um, so, but it was very tough to get going on this one, because I had such a, um, I was very critical of the songs I was. There were probably 5 or 6 Inclination songs written for the full length before any of them made the record. You know, there were probably like 6 ones that I ended up scrapping. That was just like, nope, you know, like not, it's not good enough. It's
Yeah.
not. So I was kind of struggling to get into a groove. The first song that was written for it was Thoughts and Prayers.
Mhm.
And that was written, the riff I wrote while we were setting up for our FYA set in 2020, right before the pandemic hit.
Oh.
Uh, so that was the first song that was written.
Hmm.
And then the record was written over the course of the next year and a half.
Hmm.
Um, but there were lots of songs that were written during that time that didn't make it.
So
Because I
you
was
were just
just,
at FYA going, "Na, na, 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 na."
it was literally while I was changing guitar strings.
Mm,
I was changing guitar strings and I came up with that, and it was like my version of a trial song
okay.
that I really really like. Um, I can't remember what it's called. I think it's the first song off of that one full length that has a double bass thing. It's the main inspo for that song.
Mm.
And I was like telling people, I was like, dude, I just wrote the craziest, like I have this entire thing written in my head, like it's gonna be awesome. And then
Right.
that song took shape, and then, but after that, I put out a bunch of stuff that I think sucked. You know, I was writing a bunch of shit that I just didn't think was up to par, and it wasn't until, you know, like writing a bunch of tracks and then scrapping them that I finally came up with um, Epidemic, and then Epidemic was the second one. Epidemic and uh, the last track on the record um, are were written at the same time
Mhm.
too. Um, and After that, things started flowing. And then it was basically like whenever inspiration would strike, you know, like once a month, you know, or like once or twice. When I really got something, I would just make sure to lay it down, but I didn't want to rush it.
Mhm.
Um, so it was a pretty slow process, but because it was slow, I think it allowed me to be excited about every song. And then towards the end, me and Peter, our guitar player, collaborated on a couple tracks.
Mhm.
But And then there was a process of, you know, because getting Chris into the band, me and Chris workshopped everything after it was demoed. Like
Mhm.
I went up to Chicago just to like play some songs with him and kind of just make sure that it all made sense playing it um, in person, you know, because a lot of it was just me writing it on a computer. So we were just kind of making sure it was all good. But yeah, we had plenty of time to do everything. And then also a big thing was we had all the vocals demoed. We had the entire record done before we even recorded the record. Like the entire vocally the record was demoed beforehand.
Oh,
So
okay.
we literally have a demo version of the album like on my computer completed
Hmm.
basically, which was I think just very beneficial because we were able to, you know, discuss lyrics and discuss vocals and melodies and stuff like as a band. And
Mhm.
it was important to us that we did it, that we prepped hard and took our time, and which is why it's so cool that it's out there because we put a lot of work into it over an
Right.
extended period of time.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think you could clearly hear that and, mentioning, the change up with having Chris in the band now. It's like there is you can argue that, oh yeah, when a guitar player or a bass player or drummer moves into a band, it's like, you might hear some subtleties, but like you really hear when it's a change in a vocalist. But just getting to hear some of Chris's like, you know, I think even just how the drums were mixed, it just felt a little bit differently as well as hearing some of his choices for fills and just like like snare pops,
Yeah,
which thinking about it now definitely, calls to the stuff that he does in Harm's Way as well. So that is a whole
yeah.
beast of its own for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so when like I said, the all the drums on, because I recorded the last there. I mean, that's a huge topic too. Is that I did all of the mixing and mastering for the Last Inclination stuff.
Oh, okay.
This is the
Yeah,
first
I don't think that we hit on that last time.
this is the first record that we outsourced. That we went to Andy from Bricktop in
Mhm.
Chicago, which was an idea that I had from the very beginning.
Hmm.
Um, and So all the drums on all the other stuff was all like samples and stuff like that, stuff that was easy to mix.
Mhm.
But whereas this time it was all a real kit. I knew the drum sound that I wanted going into it. Like even on the program stuff, I was like, it's got to have a super poppy snare. And Harm's Way has a snare on Rust that I really really like.
Mhm.
It's like the poppy one that everyone knows.
Yeah.
And he's gotten rid of it since. Like Harm's Way has like a pretty lower tune snare now, but
Mhm.
um, I was like, that's like important. I want the pop of like like a early 2000s, late 90s hardcore thing. Like kind of a new age record sounding snare, like a One King Down sounding snare.
Mhm.
Um, and that was just a bunch of other stuff, that we were able to take our time and like even craft a drum sound that was like really cool,
Yeah.
and really important. And like that was something I had from the beginning, was like, oh, I want this snare. Like, oh, I want this type of guitar tone. Like we actually were able to sit down and like craft every individual part of the record, which
Yeah.
is great.
Versus, like, plugging into a guitar amp and being like, should we scoop the mid this much or just a little bit?" You know?
Yeah.
Like,
Or
yeah.
yeah, just like plugging in, doing like a DI thing, making it easy.
Yeah.
We actually spent way more time on it this time around,
Yeah.
which is
And
awesome.
the crazy part of this whole thing is that this is on top of, like, Knocked Loose, just, okay, we're going full, tour mode again. So being
Yeah.
a like, was that challenging to, like, find the maybe week or even weekend gaps that you had to be like, "Okay, well, in a normal world, I might just be chilling or, like, doing some stuff at home, but I have to go out to Chicago to work on this stuff with Chris, or I have to go out and
we
work on
got
this stuff."
we got lucky because we finished everything right before touring came back, like right
Oh, okay.
before.
Mhm.
So like we literally recorded the Inclination record, got it completely done, and then I immediately left
Mhm.
for tours. So that's basically what it is. And it was basically, I think we finished up the record like last fall, summer ish. So it's been a year, pretty much a year since it's been recorded.
Mhm.
Um, First recorded, and then obviously it took a couple months to mix, and then art and all that. It takes a while, and but like I said, I'm and I make this clear, and like when I post about it, I'm extremely proud of it. Um, and I think that we took the correct amount of time. And the lifespan of hardcore bands and stuff like that is usually pretty short. So whenever I put out something for Inclination now, like in my eyes, like Inclination has already passed people caring, because we had our like year or two where we played the big fests, and
Right.
we already, we put out 2 7 inches, and then usually the full length is where people start hopping off and just don't really care anymore.
Mhm.
So I'm very appreciative of anyone that has checked it out, because it's like it's definitely, to me, anyone that listens to it is just like, oh, I mean, this is by far the best thing we've ever done. Like
Right.
it's not close. It's definitely the best thing that we've put out.
I thought it was also again, going back to what I was saying about, like, feeling inspired as far as the record, like, just moving me in an emotional way, it seemed. Like, I think you starting the record with an acoustic guitar track primarily that, like, leads in with feedback and build up and just anticipation, that I think kind of, like, set the tone fully. Was that, like, a tall ask to be like, "Okay, here's the LP," and you're like, "I wanna start with one of these guys."
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really think it was that daring or different. Like it was an idea that we had in the studio. That intro and outro of the record, which are the
Yes.
acoustic guitar, was an idea that we had in the studio. Um, and it's cool because I think that it kind of it might rub some people the wrong way, because it might come across as like overly dramatic, or like, Inclination, because our lyrics are so straight edge in the past. They're like, some people have called them like superhero straight edge. Like it's just like it's so blatant, like it's every song,
Mhm.
and it like calls it out by name, and it's so obvious to people that I think it turns some people off. But what's funny is that we have a pretty dramatic intro, and then right after it is definitely like the darkest Inclination stuff and most personal stuff that's ever been written. Like
Right.
no one can really say that about this record. Like
Mhm.
it's definitely like way darker than the stuff and way more personal than the stuff that's happened before, you
Right.
know. So um but I'm super into, you know, listening to the it's also the difference between the first and second record are pretty clear. That I mean, I'm a huge fan of melody, you know, like super big choruses and, you know, like stacking melodies and stuff like that. But if you put too much of that in, it'll take away from the heaviness and darkness of the record. So I think we reached a good middle ground here
Mhm.
where I kind of got it all out in a couple tracks. Like the last song has this huge explosion of like melody and drama in it. And like When Fear Turns to Confidence is the same way. Like that's mostly a melodic song.
Yes.
Um, uh, so that was another point in the record of like trying to blend the two things that Inclination does in a way that was like correct. You
Mhm.
know, like we have the rawness and the aggression and in something like the first record, and then a bit of melody introduced on the second record, and trying to get those to agree, you know, to a point where it's not boring, you know, and it works well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah, the question of it if it's daring or not is, you know, to be determined, but I think the expectation is Inclination is a heavy band. When I click this first song off this brand new record, it's just gonna, like, hit me in my face, or there's gonna be this, like, yeah. But,
Yeah,
the fact that it was just a slow acoustic kinda strumming, it was like, "Oh, I need to pay attention of what's actually gonna be happening on this." And I think that just, like, it it caught me off guard in the best way possible, I think. And I'm sure other people probably feel that.
yeah, I hope so. And like I said, the lyrics are kind of like we created kind of like a mission statement,
Mhm.
you know, for the record. That's pretty much clearly explained in the first track, and then you basically see it take shape over the course of the, you know, 10 songs or whatever. So
Right.
um yeah, I'm super stoked on it. I, you know, that was an idea that really took shape in the studio. So
Yeah. Something that's a little newer to the show since you were on here, Isaac. I like to ask this question to anyone who has like a big body of work, a large discography, and since we're focusing a lot on inclination, I feel like kind of feel like I know the answer if I was going to ask you this question if it was like loose related. So let's keep it only inclination focused. And you can include the new songs off the new record if you want to, or you can exclude them just based off how new they are to people. What do you think is the most overrated inclination song, and what's the most underrated inclination song, in your opinion?
um I this is hard because we haven't played tracks off the new record yet, but I'm kind of, whenever you put out a hardcore record, I'm kind of expecting people to not care about new songs and just care about old songs.
Sure.
Um, I like inclination material. Like there's not really much that I dislike. But I think that there's probably, just because it's a full length, there's going to be songs on the full length that are overlooked when we play it live. You know, because it's like track 7, you know, or track 6, you know, aren't going to go off. Whereas, um, so it's definitely one of the songs on the full length is probably going to end up getting canned by people. Um, so, but I can only accurately say that
Until you
um,
see it and you're testing things out. Yeah, yeah.
when we see it, you know. The most overrated. I would like the track that gets the biggest pop is No Exit, of course, because it was like the first one. But I think that song fucking kicks ass. so 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 I definitely know that. I'm gonna say I don't think that we have an overrated song. I don't think, like, I've never
Okay.
thought that. I'm not to the point where, you know, like obviously you mentioned Knock Loose. It's like I could scream Counting Worms all day, you know, because
Right.
it's like a meme song and that's the one that people listen to.
Hmm.
But like Inclination has never had a set like that. where it's like we've had people only, like there's a couple tracks that people really care about, um, but that care about more than others. But um, yeah, okay. Here's what I will say: um, we had this song "Into the Shadows" that we tried to play for um, before. Like we did it for like one small run,
Mhm.
and no one gave a fuck about it at any point.
Yeah.
When I went into it being like, "Oh, this is like a really dark, epic,
That's
fucking
the
sick ass
4th
song."
song off the 2nd EP, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And no one gave a fuck about it. So I'm just gonna say I'm just gonna go with that as far as
Sure.
underrated. Uh, and then yeah, no overrated songs were awesome.
I
So
will say that's a Scoped Exposure podcast first as far as someone being like, I don't think there's any overrated Inclination songs. Maybe Counting
yeah,
Worms
because
is so overrated that it kind of bleeds into your other projects.
yeah, I mean, like I'm like thinking about it. It's like because the ones that pop off are like some of my favorites to play. So it's like No Exit, sick. It's a good song. Like Culture of Corruption, sick. It's a
Mhm.
good song. Like um there's none that I really dislike or have or am not bored with playing.
Mhm.
And also there's something to be said about the fact that Inclination doesn't play very much. So it's like
The ratios of, gauging if something is overrated or underrated are a little bit more spread out.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, Going back to our first podcast discussion, there was something that we hit on that ended up, I think it was like the actual clip of the podcast. And what I thought was a very interesting conversation, I ended up hearing through, friend groups and things like that, as far as like either people not agreeing with it or just had like some uh not backlash is a pretty strong word, but it was when we were talking about demo bands and how you were saying how Knock Loose is a band that, tours all the time, has worked for everything you guys have achieved, no handouts, that whole thing. And Inclination is kind of a band where it was kind of the opposite, where it's like you put one thing online and then you guys are traveling all over the place to be able to play shows. Um, and I don't know. I'm just wanting to bring that back around if you have the same opinion of that, because I think the landscape of hardcore is just so different than it was prior to COVID, as far as like being able to start something and get a leg up, and even just the speed at which bands can build their, for lack of a better term, empire off of such small bodies of work. It's just totally different. So I wanted to
Yeah.
bring that back around if you have any other thoughts when it comes to demo bands or some of those things.
Well, before I even get into it, did you see backlash from that comment? Because I didn't see any.
Oh,
Did you?
it
Was
was
there some?
more like talking, like it was purely just talk amongst certain groups of people
Oh, okay.
that I'm either friends with or just know of. And I was like, if you listen to the podcast, like Isaac clearly states, like, I think some of the people were saying, oh, well, it's easy for him to say because he plays in this big band. It's like, well,
Yeah.
no, I think
Well, here's the thing about that is people will bring that up a lot. They'll be like, "Oh, like you play like dude, you play in Knock Loose. If I was making money or I was doing that, I would do full time too." It's like, "Well, where do you think that we didn't you think that this just started? Like do you think that we started and it's like, "No, dude, I was eating Little Caesars pizza that was thrown out, you know?" Like that's what I was living. I was like stealing because I couldn't afford shit. Like that's where Knock Loose comes from.
Mhm.
Like that's where our roots are. And that's not even me trying to like puff my chest up or anything, but that's just like the reality is that if you work and your band is good, it's gonna get there.
Mhm.
Like it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
And now you don't even have to do that. And that's cool too. Cause I would never talk shit because I'm in Inclination. I'm literally in a side project um that is able to play like 9 shows a year,
Right.
and it be like pretty cool and we can make money and play some cool shows and that's dope. And if that's what people want out of it, that's absolutely true. But I think that my main point when talking about that last time, I can't remember the exact conversation, was like, for me, the best way to bring success to your band is to go out and is first to be good, and then two, to go out and play. And it's like that confirmed works. Because it's like, think of all the things that come from playing shows. It's like, what pops bands off now? It's like live clips on Twitter. It's like, like show reactions. It's fucking, it's like all this stuff, all this social media stuff. It's like your band is going to get bigger the more that you're put in front of faces,
Right.
So, um,
And being
I
good
think,
doesn't need to be like technically good. You just need to do your
no,
thing super, super
just
well.
like, yeah, just do what you do and crush it and go out and play to people, because it's like, if you put out your stuff in a hardcore space, like a band like Ingrown from Boise, it's like, dude, like Ingrown was a band for years before they put out this last record. I saw them play to 5 people in their hometown. Like, if they can, they what they did, they fucking grinded, they like worked really hard. I don't know those guys like super personally, but like huge respect to them for like grinding and just like putting out incredible music. And now, like, who doesn't fucking know who Ingrown is? If you're into hardcore, it's like they're like
Totally.
one of the bands, and it's like that's just how it goes. It's like,
Yeah.
so that's why I do encourage people to always, it's like, yo, like, do the full US, like do the, like play Chattanooga, like play Boise, play, it's like, because it pays off, especially if you keep going, like I swear it pays off, like there's even bands that are large bands that don't draw as well, that have great shows in LA and New York and maybe like Houston or the big cities, but then when they get to Kansas City, or when
Or
they get to
Fargo, North
Omaha,
Dakota, or
yeah,
Western
or
Canada.
Fargo,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's not as big, it's not crushing it. But
Yeah.
like I can consistently say that Knock Loose playing a show in like North America is usually, it's pretty much always going to be lit.
Mhm.
And it's because like we did the time
Right.
in playing those places. Like we, this last tour we played um I mean, yeah, I think it was Omaha. I think we played Omaha, and it was one of the best shows that we played in forever. And it's in fucking Omaha. It's a place that some people would be like, "That's funny," like, but
Sure.
no, it's not funny. It's just awesome,
Mhm.
and like that's what happens when you play those places and kind of build your rep, you
Yeah.
know. Um, so yeah, I don't really have much more to say on that other than like I would never diss a band for being like a part-time band because I'm in many.
Right.
So but I will always recommend. I'm always telling my friends, like I have so many friends that put out records that are like, is this good? Should we do this? And I'm like, yeah, fucking do it. Like,
Right.
go play. Like, it's awesome.
Yeah. I think the main thing that you were mentioning is just, yeah, just going out and playing. And I think the attitude that you were seeing was like people that put out a demo and then immediately want to play FYA or immediately want to play
Yeah,
LDB Fest or something. So
yeah.
yeah, like I totally get it. And
That
I
happens. Like
totally.
a lot of that stuff is just friends band. Like if Homeboy was in Big Band A, when he starts Big Band B, it's probably gonna play the fest.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
that's, but you know what? He probably had to grind in Big Band A
Yeah.
to get Big Band A there.
Yes.
So it's like, for example, like the Young Brothers, like I know you had Colin on recently. Um, it's like that dude's put in work, brother. Like those dudes have put in work, and same with like any of these other guys, that I could name many. So it's like I would never come at anyone's band like that and be like, I've never been the type of dude to be like, oh, they never work for what they got. Because
Right.
it's like, dude, like a lot of these dudes are starting bands that have already started like 5 or 6 bands at least, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
Um,
and that's been something that I've been thinking a little bit about is, like, the whole process of, like, "Oh, well, this band is only big because, it's members of so and so," and, like, I think I've come around to it now where it's like, it's that band doesn't deserve to be big because those people are, and if that person expects their band to just have this crazy jumping off point, like, that is maybe a thing, but you can't deny that there are gonna be more people that are gonna listen to something because that band A that you were saying, they grinded, they, like, showed up for the community, they did all these things, so, like, it's
there's no reason to be like bummed at someone for being excited because a guy's in the band. You know,
right,
like you know what? I'm excited for any Taylor Young or Colin Young band. You know, just
right,
as an example.
yeah,
Just as if there's someone out there that's like, "Oh, the Knock Loose guy has a new band." Like,
mhm,
yeah, if you want to listen to it because I'm in Knock Loose and you find more stuff because of that, like, sounds awesome. You
yeah.
know, like go for it. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, it's very it's funny because I'm in the midst of starting, another project right now, and, uh, the vocalist's old project, Set Straight, played with Knocked for Wild Rose, and Zach
Yeah.
was saying, was like, I don't know. I think this project might pop off. And it's like, I'm like, well, because the goal for me is just to have something like regionally that I can do locally. And I almost don't want something that can get opportunities. But if something does come, I'm like, okay, let's go
Yeah.
do that. But he was like, it's because we got the scope man in it. And I'm like, Let's play that down a little bit. But I do
Yeah.
think that I can't deny that there will be more people who consider to check it out because I have my fingerprint on it versus
Exactly.
like, and that's just one layer to someone checking out music versus the band name is cool, the artwork is crazy, or like, there's a feature on,
There's
like,
so much.
it's
There's
a
so much that
lasagna
goes
of
into it.
layers there.
Yeah, there's so much that goes into it, and it's up to there's some things that you can't help. But there is stuff that you can help.
Yes.
It's like, okay, making sure your record's first off fucking good, making off it's recorded well, mixed well, art is badass, like lyrics are awesome, making sure that you have some sort of presence on the internet that you can promote yourself with, you know, and there's a list of like fucking thousands of more things. And like it's just situationally. Sometimes you're friends with a lot of famous people that are willing to share your band, and it's like cool. It's like not everyone has that, but at the same time, it's like bands are still able to do it without that.
Hmm.
Like I said, fucking Ingrown from Boise, Idaho. Enough said.
Right.
Like there you go.
Yes.
It's like yeah, done deal.
If there's someone who's doing like an actual like research paper about like bands blowing up and Ingrown is not in your synopsis, like you're doing it wrong for sure. Because that band
Yeah,
is almost like a is case study worthy in my
yeah,
opinion on how much they have grinded in such a like one of the most underdog parts of the states for sure.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Hmm.
and that's the stuff about hardcore that I find the most interesting.
Hmm.
And the coolest. So
You were mentioning how Knocked touring anywhere in the States is gonna be lit because of, that's kind of at the scale that you guys are at. Um, when's the last time is Knocked Loose playing a quote unquote bad show more on like things on the band side that are going wrong? Because I think you were talking about it on the downbeat where you were saying yeah, there's no bad shows, and it made me think it's like, okay, when you're an early band, it's all about like, oh, how is the crowd reacting to this? But now it's like majority, like 90% of the people on a Knock Loose show know exactly who Knock Loose is, whether you're headlining or playing a supporting act. So is it more on the like, when's the last time you had a like quote unquote bad show, and why was it a bad show?
see, I think that the possibilities when you're doing like, for example, in these past 2 tours, we've had the possibility of having a bad show more often than we did in the DIY days. Like
Sure.
we played a bad show in Arizona on the Bring Me the Horizon tour. There was a lot of people there. They didn't give a flying fuck about us. Like, dude, we just did a rap tour. Like, do you want it? Like, at, Knock Loose still plays bad shows all the time. Like, we do play bad shows. And if you're judging it by strictly how many people are there, then sure. That, like, Knock Loose doesn't play bad shows that often. We usually, there's a good amount of people there for whatever reason.
Sure.
Sometimes there's not. We still have ones that aren't crazy, but usually by general, like, the amount of people you can fit in a room, it's usually pretty good. But like nowadays, we play more shows to people that don't care or don't like it than we've ever had. Like, we were just the metal band on the rap tour. It's like, you want to know what a bad show looks like? Try playing to a kid that's doing this in the front row.
There was people like right in front of you that were like fingers in their ear holes.
People that hate it. Like, and we've been doing that for years too. We did a Day to Remember. There's people that are, showing up, because they heard a pump goes pop, pop goes, punk pop, whatever the fuck, the Day to Remember song, and they come and they get this dude screaming in their face and they're fucking pissed about it. Like,
Right.
we got like booed on that tour once, like,
You got booed on that tour?
I mean, it was like a guy, but like, yeah, like
Oh, like
people,
one Joe
yeah,
Schmo, not like
yeah,
okay.
yeah. But like, there would be people like that,
Damn.
and there's people on Twitter every day that are like, this band's fucking dog shit. I'm having to sit through this shit. So it's like, no, like, it's there. Like,
Right.
people do, and you have to just kind of take it, because at the same time, all of those Suicide Boys shows, in my opinion, were good, because the majority of people seem to be into it, but it's like,
The
the possibility
ratios
of
are
it
just different. Okay,
the
I
possibility
understand.
of it being bad is like, it's like 50-50.
Mhm.
It's like, we went up there every day being like, this could be the fucking worst thing ever,
Right.
and like, and also opening a tour or like being support on another person's tour, there, like, that's, there's always going to be a huge possibility that people just don't give a shit about what you're doing. But that's part of the fun for me for doing a show like that, is to be like, you know what, for the next 20 minutes to 40 minutes or whatever, like, this is my stage. I'm going to either terrify these people or win them over. And it's
Right.
going to be either one,
Mhm.
and that's my dream. Like, if someone hates us and they're making it known, I want them to hate it even more by the end. Like, I want to
You
milk.
want them to dig their heels in
Yeah,
that
I
stance.
want them
Mhm.
to be like, oh, they were so, maybe so uncomfortable. Like, I want to get in their face and I want
Right.
to scream at them and I want to make it dramatic,
Mhm.
because like, that's the type of shit that I liked when I was younger. I was going into heavy music because the edgiest bands, the fucking craziest ones, were like my favorites,
Right.
and they didn't give a fuck what people thought, and they played to whoever. And if people didn't fuck with it, they were just like, doesn't matter, we're gonna do our thing, you know.
Yeah, because you can kind of even if you have no idea about the person, you can kind of gauge when it's like something's going wrong or this artist is bombing. And
Yeah,
I know you guys are hella tight live. Like, so someone could be like, it made me super uncomfortable, but that is not like this band was bad live.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's so easy to say that, but I think if the actual thing is like I felt scared or I felt uncomfortable or I felt like my skin was making me crawl based off of that, that's still a reaction.
yeah,
And it's
exactly.
funny that you brought up some of that was happening off A Day to Remember, because many moons ago, the first and only time I saw A Day to Remember, I don't remember the complete tour package, but the band before A Day to Remember was Whitechapel, and literally I was not into them at the time, and I literally like was kind of like in the lobby area of this giant theater that they were playing. And then I like saw people come out and I was like talking to people. And they're like, yo, people were like pulling people out, like dozens of people who were getting knocked out or just like slammed during Whitechapel. And it was just like that visual and that like persona has stuck with me ever since, and then finding the band and actually like appreciating it now. But I do totally agree that there is something to be said about being the quote unquote scary band because that still sticks with people.
Yeah, and I think it sticks with people. People can come around later,
Yes.
it keeps you thinking about it,
Hmm.
because like that same thing, like we would play shows and there's literally people that are like, get me out of here, I'm scared. And it's like, dude, what's fucking cooler than that?
Right.
Like somebody's like, oh, like, oh, what's going on? Like, to me, that's the coolest shit ever. Obviously, I don't mean it in a way that's like, I don't want anyone getting hurt. I don't want
Yes,
anyone having,
obviously.
I don't want anyone having a fucking panic attack. Like, I don't want any of that, like, clearly. But
Mhm.
if you're like overwhelmed and like freaked out, and this is a new thing to me, like, that's a sensation that I craved when I was
Right.
younger.
Mhm.
So it's like, that's what I try to put across when I perform.
Yeah. Yeah, it really brings me back to when Brian was on the podcast and we were just talking about he said he loves playing to the confused face because it's
Yeah.
kind of like they're on the fence about I don't know whether I'm gonna like just walk out or like go on my phone for the next 20 minutes or if I'm gonna like am I captivated by this?
Well, it becomes the job. The confused face
Totally.
is cool because you can point him out, and I'm like, okay, it's my job to get that guy right.
Mm.
Like, by the end, it's my job. Like, I'm gonna make him like it by the end, and it works. You see people do it.
Mhm.
You know, I can literally, like, I'm in a position where I can literally look at someone in the front row and scream at them until they like it or hate it.
Mhm.
You know, and that's like one of the coolest things about doing what we do at the level that we do it, is
Yeah.
being able to, and that's why our band, I think, has survived for so long, is playing to those people that don't really know, and then just kind of trying to do our best to convert, you know.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue because something that I found really interesting on your pod with Craig is you were saying the mission of Knock Loose is to play at this point is to play large scale like heavy music tours or even not heavy music or just big scale tours, get those people to come to our headlining shows and then filter those people naturally to the hardcore scene.
Yes.
Obviously, that's not a day one knock loose mission statement, but when did that realization come into play of like, oh, this is maybe not like our destiny as a band, but like this is the opportunity that we have to like really pull people and build the scene that way.
I mean, as soon as people started coming, as soon as we started doing any sort of mixed genre stuff, where we realized that there was people that weren't strictly into hardcore,
Right.
you um, it's just become part of what we do. Like, obviously, the goal of the band is to just grow in general.
Totally. Yeah.
Um, Part of that experience for us, because the hardcore show is the best type of show, period. There's
Yes.
nothing that comes close. It is the best type of show. And I think that a lot of people who play in bigger bands would still say that. So the goal is to even make our large scale shows feel like hardcore shows,
Hmm.
and to bring people into that world. So, we're siphoning people in via a fucking Counting Worms TikTok, or, Mistakes Like Fractures Sirius XM radio play, and they come see us at Aftershock Fest, and then they come see us headline, and they see fucking Rotting Out, or whatever. And that's the goal, is to get them to go to, get them to go back home and start a band, and fucking, it sounds corny, but just like start going to shows. And like, that's literally like the coolest thing about it, is to see how, because we love seeing how people react to our band when they're not in a comfy space.
Hmm.
So I want to see how people that aren't used to it react to the bands that we take out
Mm.
in that.
Yes.
Like,
Hmm.
I want to build a show where people are like, like, whoa, like I've never seen anything like this before,
Hmm.
and obviously, like, there's bands that I want to tour with that aren't strictly hardcore bands, but even if it's not a hardcore band, like, still the most important thing is to build a show where people are like, whoa, like I got so much out of this. Like I
Hmm.
got, and hardcore is like Knock Loose started as a hardcore band. We're hardcore kids, and we care about the movement, and we have always taken out bands and shown love, and it's just an important part of what we do,
Hmm.
and creating that experience for people is something that means a lot to me and means a lot to the rest of the people in my band.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds like a lot of that ideology is self-imposed versus like there is a weird mantra that, and I'm sure you've seen this with, other bands within our space that are going outside the norm of, uh they're breaking into new territory, and like a big conversation that a lot of people talk about is like what Turnstile is doing these days, and especially with like the Blink tour coming up. And I think I was like listening to an Extra Grind podcast where they were talking about like, is it Turnstile's responsibility to be like, okay, now we're getting these opportunities, so we can go and do those things. um maybe there's some of that, but at the same time it's not owed. So like, do you have any thoughts on that when it comes to like what is the level of us being able to maintain, our band growing and like, making sure like that is still in check while still, you know, passing some things down and pulling some people up at the same time? Or do you think it's like we can do that on this headlining tour, but we can't do that on this specific opportunity?
I don't The way I think, I've talked to Brian about this recently. I don't need to prove to anyone that I like hardcore. Like I've already done. Like I don't That's bullshit.
Mm,
Like I don't I'm putting hardcore bands on my shows because I want to. And if I didn't, I don't want anyone coming at me saying like you don't support this, you don't like this, because
mhm,
it's like, motherfucker, look at what I've done.
right.
Like look at who I am. You don't know me.
Mhm.
Like I'm going to a military gun show after this podcast that's going to have like probably 50 people at it, and I'm going to mosh, and it's going to be awesome. So like, and so like you don't get to tell me that I'm not a hardcore kid. And that's been another thing that Knock Loose has had to deal with since day one.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, day
Mhm.
fucking one was like, you're not this, you're not that. Like, and we'll always deal with that. And that's
Mhm.
fine. I'm used to it by now. But it's like, I don't think Turnstile owes it to take hardcore bands on their tours. I don't think anyone at that level does. I think that Turnstile's probably going to continue to put core bands on their stuff, or at least like smaller alt bands
Yeah.
that they really
Yeah.
enjoy. And I think that they're going to do it because they fucking like it, and
Right.
they want people to see that, and they care about the tours that they're doing, and that's why they're going to do it. They're not going to do it because they think that they owe it to people. Those dudes are grown, like those dudes are probably like 30 plus, been in millions of other bands. Like we all know, the rest of those guys catalog. Like, dude, they've put in the work,
Mhm.
just as I've put in my work. So it's like, no, I don't think that anyone in that position owes it to do that. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to do it, and we're going to do it because we like it. We're going to do it because we enjoy it.
Yeah. I think this weird expectation off of like, oh, like we can't all like there can't be 100 bands at the same level that Turnstile is. Like there needs to be a bit of like a funnel to be able to do that, because if there was 100
There's
Turnstile
not,
size bands, it wouldn't
there's
be a good
not,
call.
and there's not, like
And there's not.
Turnstile is doing something that no hardcore band in the world has ever done, ever.
Mhm.
They are larger than anything um, that has ever happened in the hardcore space, I think, to me.
Mhm.
I don't think that anything in their position has ever happened. Like this band is playing like 10,000 cap shows, you know, like in just on a tour. Like they're getting to that level, where they're just one of the biggest guitar bands in the world. It's not about hardcore. It's about rock. It's about alternative music. And I am like, I'm not trying to make it just about them, but just like they are handling themselves extremely well in the way that they're taking that. And everyone should be proud of Turnstile for what they're doing and the way that they're handling it, and their headliners and stuff like that. I think that it should be a staple way of
Mhm.
doing it. And you know and they're like a band that I hope people take inspiration from in the future. Just as we took inspiration from bands like Every Time I Die and Terror. When we started, it was like that was always stuff that we cared about, and we've gotten shown love and passed down love from so many bands. Like Etid taking us out, giving us a shot. Putting us direct support on their tours. Like Terror taking out young bands all the time. It's like walking that line of doing cross genre stuff, but also coming back and showing love. It's like that's what it's all about. You
Mhm.
know.
Yeah, I think being able to, because I think that, like, I love how you said, like, I don't need to prove to anyone that, like, I like hardcore. And I think that's
Yeah.
is such a body of, like, it it is so represented off of, like, records that you put out, podcasts that you do, like, little things. Like, I think people can sniff that out, and I think anyone that has, like, takes or criticisms of that, they're just looking to, like, I think that's, like, if anything, that's something that, to me, it feels like, oh, like, you must not like hardcore enough to think that way. Because I
Yeah.
think anyone who's, like, this deep in it feels when someone else is as deep into it.
Like if someone doesn't think that I like hardcore, they probably think that a lot of other people also do. They probably think that hardcore is just them and their friends, and that's
Sure.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and if you want to think that way, whatever.
Mhm,
I don't care. It's not my business.
mhm.
But I love and care about this music a lot. I mean, it's literally my entire existence is based off of it. So um, we know what we are. We love how we handle ourselves, and we're going to continue to handle ourselves that way in the future.
So, speaking of loving hardcore, something that is just crazy to me is that, in my opinion, like, you having Knock Loose and Inclination alone is already a lot on your plate. Some could argue that just playing a Knock Loose could be enough. But the fact that you have Two Witnesses, Weapon X, a lot of other projects, I'm sure some projects that aren't even announced yet, like,
Yeah,
is your calendar just fucked as far as, like,
yeah. I'm just working all the time.
right.
I've never taken an actual vacation in my life,
Mhm.
like actually. But I like it that way.
Mhm.
I enjoy it that way, and like I said, I want to show love to Weapon X, which is a band that I started with Trey that I'm super proud of, and then I want to show even more love to Two Witnesses, which is a band that me and my friend uh, Jim, started, and that band doesn't get to play a ton, but I'm super proud of those songs. I think Jim did a great job playing them, and I think it's a really really good band. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of stuff that I'm not able to be a part of that I'm super proud of still.
Yeah.
You know, um, everything that I put out and everything that I'm a part of, I care about. And there are other bands, like in the works that I'm still, that are still like, I have a million demos on my phone that are bands or records that haven't been out yet, ideas that haven't been fleshed out, stuff that's getting worked on, and there's more to come.
Yeah.
So
Has
um,
I know for when Noct was up for Wild Rose this year, it was like Weapon X, Inclination, and Noct, like, not back to back to back, but, like, all on the same day and in a venue with no AC, and just it was a time. Has that been the max as far as, like, playing 3 bands, or has there been more through, like, an LDB iteration?
I think three is the most I've done. I think three.
Mhm.
Uh, I think there was one time when I might have done 4, but the 4th one was like a mini set that was only like 2 songs, so that doesn't
Oh,
really
like a little
count.
surprise scenario or
Yeah,
something? Okay.
um, but it's not even really that exhausting for me to do that, to be honest. Like, when you're in the moment, it doesn't really matter,
Right.
like, I was always like, after the Inclination set at Wild Rose, for a second I was like, oh man, like I'm really tired. But then like as soon as I started the Naku set, it was like fucking awesome and
Right.
it was all good, So
Yeah.
um I enjoy playing it. So
Mhm.
it's fun whenever that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it was funny
It's
'cause
more so it's more so stressful to like get that organized, like practicing for all the sets.
Right. Yeah, it's like, man. Yeah, because Dave from Weapon X just was on the podcast and we talked a little bit about that. I will say one of the craziest things that I learned from that interview was the turnaround time for the demo, as far as like, okay, it's done recording, it's getting mixed, and now it's like on streaming as of the next day. So
Yeah. Dude, well, did he
that's
tell
why.
you I haven't listened to that episode yet because it just came out the other day, but
Mhm.
um I will say, did he tell you the funny mixing story about that? Because this
No,
is
he did
fucking.
not.
Oh,
So
well, then I have a story for
okay,
you.
please hit me.
I I'm going through because we were going to Andy
From Bricktop.
to Bricktop to record to mix the Weapon X stuff. I recorded it all. And we knew it had to be quick, knew it had to be last minute. So I, get the Dropbox link from my Dropbox and I have all the stems bounced, and I'm just like, so I send it right to Andy and he's like, okay, man, like he's got like a couple weeks to make sure I think. And he's like, all right, like should have this, I'll have this in time to get a couple passes going. Like we'll be all good. Like this should be good. So I wait like a week or two maybe, and then Andy hits me up. He's like, I got that pass for you. Like, want to take a listen? I was in Europe at the time.
Oh, okay.
Uh so
So you're
wasn't home.
8 it no, wait, 8 hours ahead,
Yeah, yeah.
ish
It
of
was like
that?
it was like 4 a.m.
Yes.
Like
But knowing you,
4
you might
a.m.
be up at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so I was still up because I was like jet lagged as fuck. So I was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like, yeah. And I'm not joking. I take a listen, dude, and it's the wrong album. I sent him the wrong stems. I sent him
No.
the two witnesses stems that I was supposed to be sending to a different guy. So because both records were being mixed at the same time.
Oh my
So
god.
so I'm just sitting there in Europe, like jet lagged as fuck, haven't slept in like 40 hours, on the verge of tears. I'm just like fucking like, I'm just sitting there like, oh Christ, like,
I done
so
fucked up.
yeah, straight up. So I literally have to send him the fucking right one, and then he does it in a very short amount of time. Fucking crushed it. Sounds
Absolutely crushed
incredible.
it, yeah.
Yeah, sounds incredible. But yeah, that happened like that, and just made it so much more stressful.
Yeah, because I
Um,
remember when Trey came on the podcast, I'm like, "Is there any kind of rough timeline that you can give?" And he was like, I think he said something when we were recording, but afterwards he was like the goal is to have it out before LDB, and then it was
yeah,
like the Wednesday of
before the
before, like 2 days before the
yeah
fest. So to
before
hear
the
that there was
pre-show,
like
yeah.
ample time to maybe have it out a
The
little.
good thing is that all the songs are like a minute and a half long, so it doesn't really fucking matter. Like it's pretty easy. It's like, yeah, it's a part, and then there's a breakdown, and then
Right.
that's it. So,
That's it.
and then uh so yeah, luckily it didn't take long to like catch on, which I'm very thankful for.
Mhm.
That whole so that was a very stressful project to get out, but once again, like super fun. Like I love Weapon X. I love everything that we've been able to like accomplish with that band so far.
Mhm.
And even though it's just kind of like a fun side thing, like I really like the music that we did for that. Being able to write music with Trey was really, really cool too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, but it like to go back to the original thing I was saying, it's like Knock Loose is here at the top, and then it's like Inclination is, it's not even just your schedule, it's off of all the other guys who have family and jobs and things like
Oh
that.
my God,
And then
brother.
it's
It's
Two Witnesses, it goes like, the
all these bands share members too. That's
yes,
all the
exactly.
same because it's Louisville. It's not a huge amount of people, so it's
Yeah.
like all these bands are sharing members.
So it's like most of the
We
time it's like an LDB kind of local fest scenario where those people will be making time and
exactly.
it's more than likely
Ex-
that you will be around to be able to do that too.
yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah. Um if okay, excluding Knocked Loose, if one of I'll say excluding Knocked and Inclination because I feel like Inclination would be the answer. If one of your side projects, the smaller bands that you're a part of, could have an entire, I'll say, quarter of a year dedicated to like pushing that band and everyone's schedule lined up and you could just like, okay, like we're going to go Knock Loose energy on this. Who would be the band that you would choose and why? And what would you hope to do
I
routing
would
wise?
do I would do a quarter of the year for every band that I'm in.
Okay.
I would just go straight for it and I would fill my schedule for a year, but allow every band to have their time,
Hmm.
Because like for like Weapon X is underutilized. Two Witnesses is underutilized. Like those are bands that could be more active and be bigger and play more,
Hmm.
but we just don't have the schedule for it. So um if I if I if I if Knockloose wasn't a thing for like a year, or and Inclination wasn't a thing for a year, I would probably finally like start the band where I do vocals. I would find like time in my space to do that, get that going, and then do Two Witnesses and Weapon X stuff
Hmm.
and whatever. And also just be around for more of the local scene,
Right.
be around for more of the local shows too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you could clone yourself, do you think the utilization of the other you would be best to play in another band or to be like churning out more music and doing more shit?
Um, it depends on what time it is. Like it depends. Like right now, I'm in a bunch of bands that just release records, so I want to be able to play all the
Totally.
records.
Hmm.
But like give it a year, and it's like, oh, I want to write new music with all of these bands, or write new music in general.
Hmm.
Um, my focus is always on KL mostly. Still, there hasn't been one point in my career where I haven't been my brain hasn't been knocked loose, like focused, where that hasn't been the main thing in my brain. Like right now, like knock loose is, in the mode we're trying to think about what's next, as far as a new record and stuff like that. So and that's like something that's very much on my brain,
Hmm.
you know. But I think that it just depends. Whenever I put out whenever one of my bands puts out an album, I want to play it. I want
Right.
it to be out there.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's not always possible given my schedule. So I definitely wish there was more time in the day and more days in the year, where I could just play even more.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a strange balancing act, like being able to be out and then it's like you're not writing, and then when you are writing, you're not playing shows. So it's like it is a weird
Yeah.
balance of that. Like do you do all like your do you do your scheduling more so just off of feel as far as like this is what I need to do, or do you have someone who like or at least some homies to be able to be like, yo, you need to be bunkering down and doing this more so. I'm just curious, like with
Um,
that amount of good things happening with anything from Knock to Weapon X, it's like where do I spread my eggs with all these baskets?
I kind of just have to plan it all out. I mean, like Knock Loose has a Dropbox, that has a schedule for us.
Mm,
Um, but it's pretty much to us as far as how we divvy up our time. We're pretty much it's just Knock Loose centric. It's basically just like as individual things come up, I have to check and make sure that it works with the windows that I have. You
Mhm.
know, um, obviously, like with Inclination being the biggest other band that I'm in, like obviously, like right now, we just put out a record that I've been working on for years, so like that takes precedent right now. I want to get Inclination stuff
Mhm.
going, but um, it's basically just like whatever. I will say that like Knocked Loose is a yes band. We've just historically said yes to anything, and I think that that's probably for the benefit of everyone's mental and the benefit of the next album will probably be a bit slower next year.
Mhm.
Um, just to give us time to prepare for the next record and to give all everyone like some mental breaks and also just give everyone time to get the stuff done that they need to get done.
Right.
um, but the Knock Loose is at the same time, Knock Loose is at the level we are because we play as much as we do.
Right.
So it's a balancing act for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I do believe that like chasing those curiosities and saying yes to things is like that is the why behind what Scoped is today is being able to like go film festivals in Tulsa or go film in like other parts of Canada or like have people that reach out to me to be on the podcast that like I might not necessarily like really like their band idea, but it's like, oh, like let's have a convo and then like it's
Yeah,
all these small bricks that kind of build into the fortress or castle that is this project or a band like Knock Loose. So
exactly.
but the other side of the coin, like you said, is like sometimes having the calendar push to like 300 plus days of Knock Loose related things, when there's only 365 in the year is like that can take a toll when people have other bands, other like partners, family stuff going on in the mix. So
Yeah,
it's
especially when it's consecutive. Like
mhm,
these past couple months were so tough because it was like since August we've been out pretty much since August, and when that stacks up, that by the end of that you're like, oh man, like I'm ready to. Most people, I don't really fall into that category, but you can see the band. You can see people be like, "Oh man, like I'd love some off time right now." And it's
mhm,
like we just got off of this tour that we started in August. When we go to Europe for a month, a couple days.
yeah.
Like so, pretty much we'll have been going from August through December.
Mhm.
You know, and then I get back in December, then go to straight to California for the Children to play with Inclination. And then,
W
so it's just like it's always a revolving door.
what is a perfect off day for Isaac? Like, no tours, no
At home,
responsibilities, at home. Or let's do both. Let's do at home and on tour, you teleport to any place you want to.
um, a perfect off day in another place is usually like when I'm on a tour, is waking up relatively early, maybe going to get like just going to get like a snack with some people. Maybe they go to a coffee shop and I just tag along and you have that like social time. But then me kind of splitting off, maybe seeing a friend by myself and um, doing my own things a little bit, exploring, like walking a shit ton, exploring someplace that's really pretty, uh, going to a movie either with other people or by myself, and then doing like a family dinner
Hmm.
is usually that's what it's like for other places. As far as a perfect off day at home, it just depends. Like my first off day back was great because it was just me waking up, getting a bunch of errands done, feeling productive, and then seeing some friends later on in the night. And that's pretty much what it is every day.
Mhm.
Um, but when I'm home for an extended period of time, like music writing and being and actually spending time playing my instruments is also a part of that. But when you're touring for like when you've been touring for like half a year, it's like maybe I don't pick up my guitar today. It's
Right.
like maybe I don't need to do that. So
Um, well, it just brings up like I think when people think of like people that get famous or they get fame off of something, there's, like, different levels to that in my opinion, where it's like, I I love being able to meet people that, like, already have the knowledge of what I'm about, what I do, and the different things. So, even outside of, like, majority of the time is, like, it's at a show, but, like, there's certain people that will build up, YouTube channels or any kind of thing that they might have like something where it's only like maybe once in a while someone's recognizing you in the grocery store or something like that, but then it gets to a crazy level where it's like you can't walk outside without cameras flashing in your face. Like, has there ever been a unexpected like person who's come up to you be like, "Excuse me, are you Mr. Isaac of Knocked Loose?" And you're like, I'm just trying to get this. I'm just trying to pick out my cereal."
No, I whenever someone talks about that, or whenever someone recognizes me, it's always appreciated. I'll always say hi to people. It's
Totally.
never. I don't think it'll ever reach a point where it's like annoying. Like maybe like after a set when I'm like winding down, maybe I
After a
don't
set
want to
is the
like.
worst time. Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe I don't want to like have a shit ton of conversations. But other than that, it's like whatever. I was recently in a I went flower picking at a pumpkin patch, and someone's mom just stopped me when it was just like, "Are you Isaac from Knock Loose?" And I was just like, "Huh." Flower patch in Ohio was not the place where I
It was not
expected
on
this
my
to happen.
bingo card.
Yeah, flower patch 30 minutes outside of Toledo is not where I expected to.
Yeah. And it
Yeah,
was
is not
a
what
mom, or was it
it
the
was.
mom
Someone's
off of
mom. The
on the
mom,
behalf of that person?
I don't know.
Oh,
Either way, she was excited. So
so moms listen to Knocked
out her.
Loose.
Shout out.
Shout
Shout
out.
out.
Shout out
Shout
to
out.
all the moms listening to this
Shout
podcast.
out, mama.
Shout out mama. Um, man, that's so funny. Cause I guess when you look at the demographics of who's listening to your bands, there are small percentages of people who are in those, like, 40 to 50 categories, so maybe that was one
Oh
of them.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Has there been an unexpected Knock Loose fan, like, someone that's come up to you, be like, "I love you guys, I've been listening, like, since the first EP," and you're like, "Oh, okay." It's not like someone wearing a Terror shirt or like a Left Behind shirt or something like that.
We're so varied as far as we have such a wide fan base now as far as like the way that people look and demographics and stuff, and plus like the internet and like I said, counting worms, TikTok and fucking all that shit. Like so many different types of people come. I will say that there's people in bands that I know that I didn't expect to like Knock Loose that have come up
Oh,
and been like,
okay.
"Hey, I like your band," and I'm just like, "Oh, that's really cool. I didn't know that person like my band. Like that's really awesome. Like that's cool. That's always a
Anyone
fun one."
specifically that comes to mind, or, like, that you want to share?
One of my, I mean, I don't think they would feel weird in me talking about this, but a member of one of my favorite pop bands called Muna. Um, they did a song with Phoebe Bridgers,
Mm.
um, and they're just fucking sick. And like it was like the one of the guitar players and singers of that band. Like I saw that they like reached out, or I saw that they followed like Muna and they followed my band, and I was like reached out. I was just like, "Yo, it's super sick that you follow us." And they like reached back and we're just like, "We love your band. Like we play your band all the time." And this is like a band that's like signed to Phoebe Bridgers' label and is
Right.
like doing shows with Taylor Swift and stuff. I was just like, "Damn, like that's so cool." Or like like I think that uh like Brian had a conversation with the singer of Pierce the Veil at When We
Mm.
Were Young Fest, and he was just like, "Dude, I fucking love it, man." We were just like, "Damn, that's fucking crazy, man. That's awesome. Thank you so much."
Yeah.
So whenever you hear stuff like that, it's always really cool.
Was, you When We Were Young Fest, uh, like, the poster alone going as viral as it did, and all, like, the memes of people making that, like, how was that experience playing that festival with, like, so many bands that I think naturally you and I probably, like, grew up listening to, like, or just, like, we're just in the midst of those bands getting to the scale of being a quote unquote nostalgic Warped Tour level band?
Yeah. The fest was fantastic. It was fantastic. It was ran fantastic. I know that there was a lot of like fucking nonstop chatter about this is fake, this is bullshit. Like, there's no way, just like people
Right.
that really didn't really know what they were talking about, being like, there's no way this is happening. Uh, and then when it got canceled because of the wind the first day, people were like, yeah, like that. But like, it was truly like one of the best put together fests that we've ever played.
Hmm.
It was went off without a hitch. So many people, I think like 65 to 70,000 people sold out Las Vegas Fairgrounds, and yeah, the vibe was great, because it was cool because like there was all these emo staples, all these large bands that have these histories and these crazy discographies, but most of them played for a pretty short amount of time. Most of the sets were like 30 minutes. So you're literally like walking through and just hearing the biggest emo hits
Right.
ever,
Yeah.
because like all these bands can do is just play their hits because that's all they got time for.
Right.
So it's like the set's like, oh, dude, Mayday Parade hits only, like Hawthorne Heights hits only, Armor for Sleep hits only. And then there's a couple
Paramore,
cool
like Misery Business and
Paramore.
Friends, you know? Yeah.
Exactly. And then there was a couple of really cool outliers, like I got to see Alex G and Poppy, which
Mm.
are like two artists that I really like, it's like that are in a different lane. Glassjaw, like
Oh,
stuff like that.
Glassjaw. Yeah, that's crazy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we had a great time, and then us being kind of the black sheep of the fest, definitely like the heaviest band on the fest, was great. It was cool. Both of our sets went off, and it was really really fun. So
Mhm.
definitely, that's my seal of approval for sure.
Yeah. So we've talked about it a little bit, and this could be maybe one of the last things that we hit on. I think when's the last Knock Loose podcast that we did here was when Kevin came on, and it was right
Yeah,
after the EP came out. So it was it was over a year ago. Because you guys had just passed that threshold, and I know that you talked a lot with Craig about just like industry wise, there's a lot of people that look down on the EPs, but like literally any person when like Knock Loose is in the conversation, it's like a oh, the EP is crazy, like the production, like it's so much darker. So I think you were saying like now it kind of puts you guys in a bit of a situation now where it's like we have to do a better addition to a full length record, which is a taller order. So like where is your mind at when it comes to the prep of that, or has that like is that not to be tackled just yet in the knock loose to-dos?
we've been prepping. Like we started writing for the new Knock Loose record. I mean, it's not even close to being done. It's not
Mhm.
even we haven't really planned recording it, but we started writing it over a year ago. So maybe even close to 2 years now. So there's been a lot of prep, and there will be the most prep that's been going into any KO record. It's going to be multiple writing sessions, lots of discussions of where we should go, lots of discussions of trying to try some new things while blending and making sure that what we have remains intact. Um, it's it's got to be the best one. That's how it is. It's got to be the best thing we've ever done. Every record that we do has to be the best thing we've ever done. It has to grow in scope and scale. We refuse to look backwards.
Mhm.
Luckily we were just able to put out a pretty confined project that it was easy for it to be as good as it is because it was only 6 songs, pretty easy to digest. It was quick. Um, but we also want to make a record that gets to a lot of people as well. Like we also want a record that is able to that's not only keeps the identity of what we have intact and is dark and is and it's super heavy, but also I want it to be large in scope. I want it to hit a lot of people. I want it to be catchy too. I want it to be able to appeal to someone that's beating the shit out of someone or someone that's listening on the radio.
Mhm.
I want it to appeal to those people. So, um, it's got to be the best and biggest thing that we've done. And there's been prep for that. Just looks like the way that Knock Loose writes is we've done it in a band setting, so we have like some writing sections that we've done as a band, and I won't get too far into it, but um, we'll as the stages progress, we'll get more in talks about what we actually want out of it, but mostly it's just stacking songs. It's just stacking songs on songs and songs, and if 12 end up on the record, we'll write 30.
Right.
And make sure that we have the absolute monsters on it.
Yeah.
And we already have a pretty good catalog of stuff to choose from. So.
Yeah, the beasts are starting to be birthed.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So yeah, like as the year is coming to a close, like you mentioned, Inclination is playing for the children in California. Is there any other, Noct has so many things that it's almost like, like just go to the band account and look through. But is there anything specifically in relation to the Inclination record that you're hoping to tackle, even before the year wraps up, or even just at the beginning stages of 2023?
Look out for Inclination release shows. You know, we're about to announce some shows pretty soon for the um, first quarter of 2023, and we'll do as much as we can. But what I will say for Weapon X or Two Witnesses or Inclination, whatever, is go see those bands all you can, because we're not able to play a lot, and Inclination especially. We are, it's a band full of adults, and all of them except me are like actual adults, with real ass jobs. So the band can't do that much. So whenever we play an area, it's like, if you can make that trip, because it's tough for us to plan everything, but stuff is getting worked on. We're going to make sure that we get out there as much as possible.
What's because Knock goes all over the world, where's the one either on North American soil place that you hope Inclination can play one day, or I'll say and international place you hope to bring Inclination one day?
I'd love to. I mean, the easy answer would be something like Japan,
Sure.
which is like clearly the best. Like, it's like one of the favorite places to play ever for anyone. But honestly, I'm really excited for Inclination to go to like the UK and Europe for the first time, just because we've been asked for so long. That would be something I would love to make happen next year.
Yeah. Has Inclination never left the continent? Because
Canada.
I know we've done Canada, but not.
Canada,
yeah. Well, fingers crossed the UK European people listening get that next year.
Hit us up in the specific windows that we can do.
When those are, I couldn't really tell you. Isaac, we're coming to the close, and as you know, we always like to end every podcast with a mosh related story that kind of bookends this whole thing. So, is there anyone off the top of your head that you want to say? I'm trying to recall exactly what the story. Oh, I know the story that you brought up. So if you bring it up again, I'll say you've already told that one.
Yeah.
I don't want to give it away because then people.
It's the one where I knocked myself out.
Yes.
But I'll give another one. I'll give a different one.
If you want to go listen to Isaac's first interview to hear the full details of that, because
awesome.
that one is awesome.
I think the one I'm going to give today is pretty. I mean, I'm going to say normal, but it's not quite as exciting. I was watching my friend's band do a Hatebreed cover to a not packed room, and my friend Tyler from Nashville, who lives in Los Angeles now and is in counterparts, he did a front flip off the stage during a Puritan cover, and into a group of people, and I've never seen a group of people just like part and just not acknowledge his existence more ever, because this poor guy did the coolest front flip and landed straight on his head, and like landed straight on his head. It's kind of scary. Like, he definitely bled a little bit. Like, it wasn't great. Like, they stopped. Like, it was not like he ended up being fine.
Yeah.
But it was just so funny that there was people there.
Mhm.
and none of them cared about his well-being whatsoever. Uh, you know, and so if I have to leave this podcast with anything, it's like catch the people that are, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good move at the hardcore shows to like
Absolutely. I
catch the
don't know
guy. Yeah,
why this visual entered my mind, but and if you're a biologist or someone that knows about insects, like please let me know exactly what this is. But there's almost like there's certain bugs that like just stay on the surface of water, and and if you were gonna like dip your finger, like they just spread out immediately. That's what kind of
yeah,
came to mind when you were
exactly.
explaining that. Well, Isaac, this has been a super fun chat. We're almost at the 2 hour mark, so I appreciate
For
that we
sure.
were able to spread it out this long. Um, all of your links to all your bands and your socials and all that will be in in the notes in the description. But if there's anyone you want to shout out, plug, or anything you want to send the people off with, the floor is yours, my friend.
Um, yeah, I'm in a lot of bands, and they put out a lot of records, and uh, so literally all I have to say is kind of what I just said. If you see anything that I promote, any shows that I'm doing, it's like know that that's kind of a temporary thing, and that come out if you can. But other than that, just like everyone should be starting bands, making zines, doing their best in their own towns, and fucking making sure the shit keeps going.
Yeah, totally. Isaac, I I've said it on other podcasts, but I want to say this to you directly. It's like you are someone that on a songwriting and just your involvement in hardcore is something that like really inspires me, and I think the way that your brain works when it comes to like writing hardcore music for all the different stuff that you do is like something that I like greatly pay attention to, and I don't think enough people give you your props, at least online. So I wanted to publicly say that I like all the music that you write. I like your how you could play in a band as big as an Oculus as well as playing in a band like Two Witnesses that might play to like 50 people. But that's still a great show. Um, and I really appreciate, like I said, coming on the podcast again and rocking with me. Maybe we'll go for round 3 in a year and a half. I don't know, but we'll see.
I'm down. I appreciate those kind words, and I really, 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 really like what you got going on here as well. And thank you so much for having me on. Appreciate it.